That was all on mute. Fuck. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Icon Edit, the show where we are becoming unbelievably gorgeous and disgustingly overeducated. My name is Monet. I'm a fellow icon in training and host of the show, so I do all the research and I share anything and everything I know on the subject. I share everything I learn with you guys, and you share anything and everything you know on the subject back with me, and we can all grow hotter and more educated together, right? My book of the week, this is a brilliant book. This is a nonfiction book, a book that every single person should read, in my opinion. Not even in my opinion, you need to read it. It is Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. It gives you the tools you need to live your life to its fullest potential, essentially, using your three main, I'm blanking on the word, but you have your health, your wealth, and your time, right? That's really all you have in your life. So you need to figure out how to use it to actually live the way you want to live and live to your fullest potential and get what you want out of life. And it talks about finding purpose and living life according to that purpose. It talks about how really there's two ways to live. You can either make money doing what you love, or you can make money in a way that's not miserable, but that can let you do what you love more, if that makes sense. Like, let's say you're really into riding horses. If you can either be like a horseback riding trainer or a guide or something like that, or you can take a job that makes pretty good money, not a lot of hours, and you could just go ride horses all day. You see what I mean? So just little things like that, just finding the balances in life and how to get what you want out of it. It's brilliant, guys. And it changed the way I see things. It made me a much happier person and a much more intentional person. So highly, highly recommend it. It's absolutely an It Girl read. If you watch my It Girl read episodes, I got into it. So 10 out of 10. But anyway, let's get into our subject of the day. We're getting into Joan of Arc part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go back and check it out. I go a little bit into historical context in that episode and just a framework of who Joan of Arc is and her personality, her like angels, her voices, just kind of a breakdown of who she is and why she is so spectacular. This episode, I'm getting more into what made her who she is, I guess, and kind of what made her fall, her downfall. So let's just get into it. So when Joan of Arc stepped into the picture, France was losing the 100 Years' War badly. And it was just kind of considered that God was not in their favor. God was not there to help them. And that was a big deal in the medieval wars, right? So the moment she stepped in, everything shifted. So the moment that things really creepy. Anyway, I keep on hearing stuff outside and I know I'm here alone. Oh my gosh. Anyway, the turning point was the siege or the Battle of New Orleans. So just a little bit of context. The siege of New Orleans was the breaking point in the 100 Year War. 100 Years War. If this city fell, France was done. If Orleans fell, then France had lost the 100 Years War, which would have actually had extreme historical significance, because if Orleans fell, then English would have taken France, and France would have been either under English rule, or it would have been at least a very strong ally for the English, right? They would have been very close. And if that were the case, then when America was having its Revolutionary War, France would not have been there to help America, and we would have lost the war. We would not have won the Revolutionary War if it were not for the aid of France and France's just overall hatred for the English, right? They kind of helped us but anyway, and if they didn't help us, then America would have never been a thing. So it stands to reason that if Joan of Arc never rose to her position and spoke up and came into being, America might have not been a thing. But anyway, I'm going off my notes here. So if this city fell, France was done. Or if Orleans was taken, and it's already been sieged by the English, so the English are just surrounding the city and it's starting to fall apart, right? So at this Battle of Orleans, the French army was very hesitant. It was very disorganized and very drained. They debated a lot on whether or not they should just attack the English. They delayed heavily, and they were slowly losing. It was a very slow burn, like any other siege, right? And then Joan arrived. Like, everyone was arguing, should we attack? Should we not? Should we just wait this out? So then Joan arrived, right? She didn't come with just strategy meetings. She came in with certainty. She said, we are in favor with the King of Heaven. We have God's favor right now. Why do we not take advantage of this? We need to attack now. And they kept pushing her. And eventually she performed a miracle. I believe they couldn't get barges across. Okay, back to it. I just had to look at my research because it was not in my script. But they arrived in New Orleans, and Joan was with them, and they needed to get food. They were on the wrong side of the river, essentially, and they needed to get food and supplies to the city of New Orleans. Of Orleans, and the wind was blowing in the wrong direction, so they couldn't really do anything. They were stalled, they were stuck, and that was another reason where they're like, dude, what can we do? We're just gonna be stuck here. Joan was like, no, we can do it. So eventually she gets down and prays, and as soon as she's done praying, the wind shifts direction. To us, that seems like coincidence, but in the 1400s, this was a huge deal, and just another tick in the favor of Joan of Arc is legit, and she is guiding France into the winning of the war, you know? She's like, no, we have to attack now. We have the favor of heaven. You can see, like, he's with me. I've changed the wind, whatever, let's do it. And so they're like, all right, let's do it. We're in. They followed her influence. So the French stopped hesitating. They went for it. They attacked aggressively. And they moved with belief instead of fear because they're like, God is with us. Joan is with us. We have got this. And Joan herself was there on the battlefield. She was carrying her banner. If you've seen her with her banner, it's very famous, a big, beautiful white banner. She got wounded by an arrow, but she returned anyway. She didn't care. And within days, the English lifted the siege, and this was a massive win for the French. This wasn't just a victory for them, this was a psychological reset. Before Joan came around, the French believed they were losing, and they believed essentially that there's nothing they can do about it because it was divine prophecy. So after Joan, France believed that they were chosen by God. So she didn't just win a battle, she changed beliefs. So you can see her real power isn't just military, it's not just commanding. It was her ability to make people feel like they were a part or inside of something divine. She pulled soldiers into her vision, made commanders trust her instincts, and made this war feel like destiny. And the most dangerous and impressive part is the English believed it too. They probably believed it more so. The English were just absolutely terrified of her, not only as an opponent, but as a concept. If she was truly sent by God, if God is whispering in her ear, then they were on the wrong side of history. They've done something to lose God's favor. So defeating her physically wouldn't be enough. It would do nothing, actually. If they just killed her, then who knows? God would probably just get more upset. They had to destroy what she meant and what she symbolized. So eventually she was captured. I'm not going to get into all the battles. Again, go to all my resources if you want more of the nitty-gritty historical dates, names, all of that, because there's tons of that. I just am not a history podcast. So I don't know what kind of podcast I am. I was going to say I'm not a history podcast. I'm very niche. I don't know. But eventually she was captured by the Burgundians, and she was sold to the English. She was captured by the Burgundians and held in this tower. And when she was told she was sold to the English, she jumped out of the tower. She hurled herself out. She fell 60 feet from this tower, and she survived. She had minimal injuries for falling out of a 60-foot tower, which is also just another thing where the English are like, shit, dude, oh my God. So she was brought to English, and then the trials began. And this is, I think, where Joan is even more impressive, because she is being absolutely battered, questioned, interrogated by a room full of, she's an uneducated girl, and she's being just absolutely berated by a bunch of very educated noblemen. So it's very intimidating, but she is able to hold her own very impressively. She was surrounded by educated men, religious authorities, and political pressure. They were under so much pressure to not only bring her down, but to legitimize English's claim to the throne again. And by doing that, they have to prove that she's a witch, that she is a sorcerer, that she was under false pretenses, whatever. She needs to admit that she was wrong, and it needs to be documented perfectly. And that's why I have so much information on Joan, is because they knew they needed to document this trial perfectly. The world is watching. She is the most famous person in the world, and the war is kind of at stake with this trial. So everything needs to be done according to code. It needs to be strictly followed, right? So they were all trying to prove simply that her power is not divine, that it is witchcraft. As I said, it had to be documented perfectly because this trial was controlling the narrative of the entire war and the outcome. So throughout these trials, as I said, she is very sharp. It becomes clear that she is very confident, very quick, very competent. She answers questions and avoids all the traps. It is very impressive the way she navigates in court, especially being who she is. Let me give an example. So at one point she was asked kind of a trick question. She was asked if she is in God's grace, and she responds, "If I am not, may God put me there. If I am, may God keep me there." That answer alone has stunned the court. So the real reason they condemned her, they couldn't break her belief. It became very clear, like, she completely believed that God is speaking to her, and she is in God's favor, and she is not going to back down from that. So they targeted a different side of things, her identity. They condemned her for her visions, her authority, and of course, her cross-dressing. The Bible directly says that women should not dress as a man. So it's interesting that Joan, being this very pious, very spiritually guided woman, would ignore that direct Bible dictate. And that was a very easy thing for them to attack. But to me, that's even more impressive because she follows her spirit. Whatever. Cut that out. Eventually they beat her down, and she does eventually give in and say, okay, maybe I was coerced by the devil. Like, I'm not working for the devil. I'm not a witch. I'm not doing anything evil per se, but I'm believing these voices, and maybe these voices are actually from the devil and not from the Lord. And that's after so much time of being intensely interrogated, questioned constantly, and I think it kind of just broke her spirits. And they were like, yes, we finally have it. This will make King Charles VII delegitimize. It will delegitimize the belief that God is favoring France and will essentially turn the tides of the war. So they send Joan back to the cell. They're like, okay, you're not going to be executed. You're good. Thank you for complying and for your admission, essentially. And she kind of stews over it, and she's like, you know what? No, I was sent by God. God is sending me these visions, these everything. God has been speaking to me. God, not the devil. And I'm very frustrated that I just admitted that. So eventually they come back up, and she's like, you know what? Screw you guys. It is God. I take it back. Everything I said. I was not coerced by the devil. I am not working with the devil. I am a symbol that God wants France to be independent and King Charles VII to be on the throne, and blah, blah, blah. So then they're like, okay, cool. We have to execute you. Unfortunately, she was burned at the stake. There's a lot of legends about her execution. A lot of the images online are of her execution. There's something very, I don't want to say very dramatized about her execution. Some people say when she went up, the executioner ripped off all her clothes before she was put up on the stake to take away her very closely guarded modesty. Some people say that, well, there's a bunch of other things that I can't remember now. Even during this execution, very brutal. Burning at the stake is almost always, it's a very horrible way to die and used as an example most often, but she stayed very composed and she never collapsed into fear. So Joan of Arc, I would say, didn't lose, even though she was executed. They never actually defeated her, in my opinion. They couldn't break her belief. They couldn't discredit her fully, and they could not erase what she had already done. She had already changed the war, crowned the king, and altered all of history. Her power wasn't in force. It wasn't in being big and strong and a big chivalrous whatever dude. It was in certainty. She was completely certain in herself always, and she never let that falter. And a woman who's completely certain and completely independent is impossible to control. And that's why she was so powerful and feared. And that for you is soft power. Joan of Arc to me is the perfect example of soft power, and just a brilliant example of how women through history and women nowadays can find power in, frankly, a very matriarchal world. Patriarchal world. In a very patriarchal world. But anyway, that is all for me today. Again, if you want more information on Joan of Arc, more of her history, more of all the details, go check out any of my resources. They were amazing. I had a lot of fun researching this episode. So now there's a new series to come. I don't know what it is yet, but look forward to whatever is coming. And have the most, oh wait, let me do all my things. Be sure, if you like this episode, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Comment something interesting about Joan of Arc that I maybe missed, or maybe I got wrong. I don't know. But do it nicely. Do it nicely. I'm so sensitive, guys. And what else? Oh, go follow my personal Instagram, Monet_Clough. Go follow the TikTok, and be sure to invite all our fellow icons in training, guys. Have the most beautiful, amazing, incredible day.